Right then. I'll move us on then to our last speaker, who is standing in due to a lack of alternative, but does actually stand generally on this side of the topic. I've also heard he's devilishly handsome. Paco, right.
I'd fuck him.
Delete that.
The floor is yours.
Delete that, Craig. Delete that. Right. Well, hello, everyone. You all know who I am. It's good to see you all here tonight. Yeah, it really is a pleasure that so many of you consistently turn out to these events. I'll begin by explaining the theory behind free speech, before talking about the clearest examples in the rest of the world where we are not free, before bringing it back westwards to prove that not only are we not free to speak in other parts of the world, but those same limitations apply through other methods right here at home. So the theory. Freedom of speech rests on two principles, license and liberty. Liberty is being able to say whatever you want to say, whereas license is being able to say whatever to the point where it infringes on the rights of another. For example, if I have the right to kill whoever I want, then that infringes on someone else's right to life. You can see how the license and having no rules results in others not having liberty. Now, this leads to a contradiction in speech, where for people to be free to say what they want to say, you need and rules and limits. This is the case in this debate. The reason that we all get to put forward our opinions in a civil manner is because there are ground rules which govern how we engage with each other. That said, the line is usually drawn at the intent to cause harm, i.e., you stop being free to speak when you decide to draw harm to another. So there's a clear limit where the structure goes up against. Now here are some clear examples where people are not free to speak. Iran. In Iran, you have a religious state where the state actively coerces conformity to a religious ideal, that ideal being a very strict form of Islam that emerged in the Middle East, again in the 1960s, with then the Iranian Revolution in the 70s. So, if you are gay, as was brought up earlier, you cannot express this. You cannot say, I am gay. You cannot put forward your position or express who you are. It will get you killed. In the same way that arguing against Islam or not wearing your hijab will result in persecution. These are clear violations of freedom of speech. Another example, North Korea, which operates on very similar principles to the USSR, where the state coerces conformity to a political doctrine. If you do not agree with the state-sponsored view, you will be put into prison. The same is true in China, where we all know about policies such as the Great Firewall, which are intended to keep people from finding out information and distributing it freely. But there are less clear examples when we bring it back westward, which equally align with violations of freedom of speech. As has been brought up in a somewhat confusing manner, Germany and Austria both have speech laws which are intended to prevent people from denying the Holocaust, which I think is not necessarily a bad idea, right? You know, the Holocaust is one of the greatest atrocities ever in human history, and it has been proven beyond doubt that it occurred. But its liberal application of these laws has resulted in the imprisonment of somewhat reputable historians and activists and artists who have just taken it a little bit too far. So freedom of speech is clearly compromised by this. Similarly, as was brought up by Shingen, who did a fantastic job pressing my side of the case, the ECHR, European Court of Human Rights, does intervene in other countries' affairs to ensure that people who say hateful things against religions are punished. But I want to go beyond state infractions. This will be my last point, because I know I'm taking quite a while. There are other organizations in society today which control speech. Think about the undue influence of corporations, the way that Twitter can ban someone when they when they do not conform to their policy, the way that Patreon will no platform users who do not agree with their policy, and the way that Facebook have removed and closed down groups. beyond this, universities, once lauded as bastions of free inquiry, are now under attack, where students will no platform individuals, preventing them from being had a say for the simple reason that they disagree with their point of view. It is clear to me that whilst there are areas of the world where the state infringes freedom of speech in ways beyond measure through law, in the West, the same is applied through public pressure, corporations, and rising political tides. Thank you very much for listening. Please oppose the motion and vote that we do not have freedom of speech. Toffee, you're up first for question asking.
Okay, so you was talking about places like social media, yeah? You say that they can control freedom of speech in their own sort of way, but they can also let people have more control over freedom of speech. Do you agree? It can also take away other people's freedom of speech.
So freedom of speech isn't necessarily something that you have more or less of. It's a principle whereby, and this is something theoretical that I was trying to point out, it's that you are free to speak unless you incite violence against someone else. That is the structure of it. That is the line. Now, corporations are able to draw the line, since it's their product, wherever they want. And recently, as corporations have received public pressure and concerns, have been drawing that line in ever more narrow ways. So you might be aware of the exodus from Patreon of users like Jordan Peterson, who refused to use the platform because of people being no platformed on it, who are of a similar political persuasion to him. And you might be aware of Twitter shutting down accounts over the controversy around Russian bots and electoral influence. So corporations can violate the principles that rest on that freedom of speech rests on. Do you see my point, Toffee? Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Chance.
You're saying that free speech is being, suppressed, right? Or like altogether banned. But, what do you say to those people who are still, advocates of this free speech within these countries that are being attacked?
Well, I mean, isn't the answer obvious? I applaud them. I applaud the people who, like the people in the Arab Spring in 2011, who campaigned for democratic principles similar to those established under Jamal Abdel Nasser before the Islamic backlash in the Middle East in the 1960s. I applaud individuals with the courage to stand up to their states in repressive regimes, and I applaud those in universities and the press, etc., who go out of their way to hear those who they do not agree with. I've spent my life setting up debate society. It should be pretty obvious that I support those who are willing to bring clashing views together and support them in a structured way so that everyone can be heard. So absolutely, I applaud them. But the truth is they're up against it, ever more so. And that's why we do not have freedom of speech. You should recognize we do not have freedom of speech to support those who do struggle for it. Because otherwise, you trample over their attempts by saying, oh yeah, the battle's already won. No, it's a battle still worth fighting. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Waffle, have you thought of your question? Or is there anyone else?
I have.
Okay.
I wrote it down this time. So, you're saying there are people fighting for freedom of speech?
To be clear, I'm not
things,
saying that, but that is Chance's words. But yeah, go on.
Yep. People are fighting for freedom of speech, and there are events and things, and people are being repressed for freedom of speech. If they are being oppressed, wouldn't that mean there would have had to have been some sort of freedom of speech first?
Yes. So let's take the example of Iran underwent a radical change in the 70s and 80s where Islam became a central part of the the state ideology to the point where now the state actively enforces Islamic principles. This means that you cannot speak out against them, and you cannot express certain points of view. That is a clear example of a place that once had, relative free speech principles. Relative, it wasn't perfect. Going backwards, in the same way that the transition from Soviet Union Russia to post-Soviet Union Russia hasn't resulted in a perfectly free place, but is in many ways an improvement. Countries can go backwards and forwards on these principles. Progress is never eternally in one way. Are there any more questions for me? Right then. Thank you very much, everyone. We will now open the floor a bit more general. So, before we got started, there were quite a few people saying that they would like to give shorter speeches, so they have something to say on the motion, but really don't want to speak for too long. So, I'm going to put up another post as a trial. To be clear, the same rules as doing a longer speech apply. Be respectful to your opposition. Don't say anything grossly offensive, and don't incite harm. Obviously. So yes, if anyone would like to give a shorter speech, feel free to react to that. And if you have a question for anyone now, not just a specific speaker, the question above is a place to go to.
Toffee, go ahead and give your short speech.
So, this is going for how freedom of speech is under attack. So you have comedians that can talk about anything, and people sit there and laugh at them. They laugh it up, they soak it up. That's funny to them. Then you've got someone who just wants to do it as a joke on social media, and then he gets a fine for 800 quid just because he made a joke. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you. Right, this seems to be quite a pub. Vukara.
One thing I definitely would like to state, since human history, the right to say what you want has been a necessity with many situations, but over time, especially around the time of 2016, 2017, it's been getting a lot more violent, a lot more chaotic, and I feel that in some situations where open opinion is involved in public, mainly in crowds around big events, when it results in any form of violence, either physical violence, emotional violence, mental violence, when it results to that, when it forms potential chaos, I think it should be controlled in a form of either a strongly sized fine or any other way where that can be controlled. That way, people can openly say their opinion, but when it gets too far, they know it's too far. I am finished.
Thank you, Vukara. Guardian.
Yes, hello. So this is somewhat of a speech and also maybe sort of a question, but to kind of harken back to a few weeks ago where we started talking about evolution of species, humans in general, I feel like the internet has evolved into such a space where maybe in the 90s and 2000s, sorry if I sound stuffed up, I'm a little sick, but in the 90s and 2000s, it gained more and more speed, and that's what I would like to call its survival era, where it was basically used for its intended purpose. But now, much like in the human evolutionary period, I feel like the internet is in its more luxury stage, in which needless things are posted and shared amongst persons throughout the world because we can now and the technology is there. So my statement / question would be, do you think the internet has been a boon or a bane to the ideology of free speech?
So, final vote time. Crunch time. Take a look at Debate Active. Let's see what you've chosen. There's no abstentions anymore, lads. We've concluded that we do not have freedom of speech by a vote of 16 against us having freedom of speech and 12 for. So thank you everyone very much for coming. See you next week.